Welcome to Module 2, the Law Society Returners Programme. Hi, I'm Keith O'Malley, and what this video does is provide a record of what was discussed at the second meeting of your Returners Programme. So what we were aiming to do, we'll start by reviewing the work you've been asked to do at the end of last meeting, then go on and go through the progress report where everybody gives a little update on how they're getting on. We were then going to look at the programme plan, and in particular what we aim to do every week over the next 3 months. We're then going to look at the practicalities of returning and some challenges that you're going to face and also some welcome developments. We then move into information sharing, where people provide information, bring along information to the meeting and provide it to other people who it might benefit. And we then finish up by reviewing the follow-up work to be done at the end of this meeting. So we started by looking at last week's work. And the first thing was quite a long video by a lady called Pamela Weinberg. And then we asked you to look at a second video by a guy called Robert Greene. You were asked to check out resources, both online and otherwise, and also to complete the workbook, the Consider Your Strengths workbook. With regard to the Pamela Weinberg video, I think a lot of people enjoyed it. What she has a lot to say, and it actually very much mirrors the, as it happens, our own Returners Programme. She says you need to aim to start by, provide a framework for what you want to do in terms of returning to work with a career re-entry roadmap. And she then went on and she talked about today's job market. She then talked about defining your career objectives. She talked about setting goals. There was a lot of talk at the meeting about this idea about producing a mission statement. Some people thought it was a good idea. Some people thought it was a little bit over the top. She then goes on, Pamela Weinberg goes on and talks about networking and puts a lot of importance on that. And then preparing to meet people, and she makes suggestions like have business cards that you can distribute to people. She does a good deal on social media. She goes through LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and talks about how you might use them within job seeking. And she finishes off with a final tip. In fact, you might call it 3 tips. I think it's get active, manage your time, and get the ideal job. So that was Pamela Weinberg. The second video we asked you to look at was by a guy called Robert Greene. It was shorter, 20-minute TED Talk. I think it's a really, really important video. I think it's for anybody who's faced with a career challenge. What he proposes is that careers of management is a very personal thing. There's no point in looking at your next door neighbor or another solicitor and saying, oh, she or he is doing so much better than I. That everybody progresses depending on the way you're approaching your career, and that if you want to make good decisions with regard to career management, what you need to do is get much better at looking inwards and looking at yourself and figuring out what's right for you, as opposed to what your next door neighbor is doing. So if you haven't watched Robert Greene yet, I strongly suggest you do it. We then talked a little bit, just very briefly, on looking at other resources that are available online and elsewhere, both for we have tended to focus on 2 groups as such people. Number one, people who are in a return to work situation, and also working mothers, because the returns group tends to have, always a good few people who have family care responsibilities. So we then went on and we did progress reports, and we asked people to talk about where they're at, and that went well. The success of a returners program is very much down to how people getting to know each other and getting interested in helping each other, and where everybody is doing their own stuff, but also keeping an eye out for their fellow returners, and helping each other and getting very involved in the group that Shane is setting up on LinkedIn. So this progress report has tended to help because we're getting to know each other and getting to know what people are interested in and what people need in order to make progress. Now, we then went on and talked about what we're going to do over the 8 meetings that we're having as part of this program over a 3-month period. We're starting with 4 meetings every week, and then we're moving into another 4 meetings every fortnight. The first 4 meetings, the very first one, which was last week, we looked at regulatory responsibility and resources. This week we're looking at practicalities really of returning to work and changes in the employment situation. We're looking at next week at job market success strategies, and also trying to make a good deal more progress on CVs, particularly different format CVs. The 4th week, we're going to interview skills. We're going to get everybody hopefully ready that you can quite confidently go in and give a good account of yourself at an interview. The following week, which is the first of the fortnightly meetings, we're going to do competency-based interviews. This is a format that's being used a lot for public sector companies and for large organizations. If you're not going for those kind of jobs, you might say, I don't expect to be doing a competency-based interview. But in truth, competency-based interviews are impacting more and more on all interviews. So it is something that you're well advised to cover. The following week, we're going to look at personal branding and how you start thinking in terms of what you have to offer at the market and how you might communicate that to the market. The following week, we're going to look at networking and maybe making speculative approaches. And the following week, the last meeting, we're going to look at proactive interviews. And what we're talking about there is where you've maybe contacted an employer and you said, could I come in and talk to you? And just how you handle that kind of an interview that you have arranged, as opposed to one that you've been invited to by the employer. So that's what we're going to handle over the 3-month period at meetings. We will also be very keen to do is provide you with a lot of one-to-one support, and I would like to think that myself and Shane will be in contact with you all, and we'll arrange to talk on a one-to-one, and hopefully we can help you on that side of things as well. It really makes a difference if you can do the workbooks, the workbook from last week and the one you're being asked to do after this session, after the module 2 session, because they can help us in terms of talking to you and understanding what you're looking for and what you need. So in terms of the practicalities of returning to work, there are some challenges, and these are classic challenges. And in fact, the ones we have up on the slide here are really very, very similar to the ones that Pamela Weinberg had within her videos. And the first is uncertainty. It's tough going out there, not quite sure what kind of a job you're going to get, in what kind of a company is it going to be, and it can be tough. A big problem for returners are what we call limiting assumptions. And that's where people say, oh, well, I wouldn't be able to do that. Things have changed so much within the area of law I practiced before. I wouldn't be able to go back in and do it without doing quite a detailed course or, working a job where I had a lot of supports. Well, our experience is that people who have progressed through a returns program find themselves in a legal firm or in a legal department, and they very quickly settle in and find that really very little has changed. It can only be likened to riding a bicycle. It's the skills you have as a solicitor, so many of them are about relationship management, about getting on with clients and getting the best out of clients, how you deal with staff, and other parties. And it's not so much about, whether a particular form has changed or anything else like that. It doesn't tend to cause any great problem for solicitors. So what we always have to do with people who are in a return to work situation is really encourage you to be brave and to don't fear. If you do have a skill deficit, there are ways that you can get, you can address that. And we talked about that last week. There's, a whole range of courses online and otherwise, and they can be useful. That sometimes you might find yourself going at a job which is a lower level that you've worked before, and this is something that Pamela Weinberg brings up, but in my experience, it doesn't really, it's not much of a problem for people in Ireland, in an Irish setting. Home infrastructure is a problem. If you've got young children at home, it can be difficult to work, and people who are in business, who are maybe working in an office, don't have an awful lot of patience for, dealing with somebody who maybe has a child on their lap, or, a dog barking in the background and that kind of stuff. So if you are going to work at home, you need to have very good, you need to ideally have a separate room, a quiet room that you can work in. In other practicalities, though, there's been a lot of changes within the job market. And clearly the most important one is what's happened in the last year and a half as a result of COVID-19. Flexible working and remote working has arrived, and it's going to be phased back, and people are going to have to spend some time within an office environment. But the likelihood is that we will all have the freedom, if we want, to work at home for part of a working week, and that's going to convenience people who are in a return to work situation in a big way. Work-life balance, there is more and more, it's more and more employers are appreciating that work-life balance is a good thing, and it needs to be accommodated. And we've had, even before COVID happened, you had situations where Arthur Cox were saying to people, if you want to work 4 days a week, you can work 4 days a week, and that type of thing. So there is a lot of there's movement on this across the profession generally, and it's going to be accelerated as a result of what's happened with COVID-19, with the lockdown. Casual employment, there's an awful lot more of it. Employers, don't want to have staff, and then suddenly they get busy and they need staff, and so the whole working world is now one much more of hire staff because we need them, get rid of them, hire staff again. But this is actually good for people who are in a return to work situation, because it's quite easier. It's easier to get a job. Another thing that can impact on people in a return to work situation is this relatively, new development of portfolio careers. Portfolio careers were first proposed by a guy called Charles Handy, who he's an Irishman who made it big, and as a management guru. And he said that in time, he said this back in, I think, 1987, that people are increasingly going to work shorter times in a job, maybe 2 to 3 days a week in one job. And they're going to have other time, they're going to have other involvements. And those other involvements might be paid work elsewhere, or they could be other things. A person maybe could be doing, further study, doing a further degree, or some kind of postgraduate studies, or they could be doing voluntary work, or any kind of combination of those. So portfolio careers are something that tend to suit people in a return to work situation, and it's something you should just be mindful. It's an option that is available to you. Now, that brings us to the end of what was discussed at the meeting, at the second meeting, and look forward to talking to you next week when we're going to look at job market strategies, success strategies, and also progress things with regard to CVs. What we're asking you to do, or what we asked you to do at the meeting was to look at 2 videos. They're both relatively short. They're I think both under 20 minutes. The first, and they're both, as it happens, by lawyers. They're American lawyers, but they're interesting as far as they're both by people who have worked in the law. And both of these are about this whole idea about trying to figure out, if I'm to do something different, what might that be? Because what we're trying to do at the moment is get you to think as expansively as possible about, the options that you have open to you. So the first is by a lady called Liz Brown, and it's called Workflow, Finding the Work You Love. And I think what she has to say is really interesting. The second one is what I really like. It's by a guy called Ryan Clemens, and what he calls it what they don't teach you at school about motivation. And he has an interesting he discusses, an interesting kind of a thing that happened to him. He found himself looking at wanting to do something different, to leave the job he was in and do something different. So he got out a pen and paper, and he started writing down everything that he was interested in and enjoyed. And he then decided that he couldn't actually earn a living doing any of those things. So he said he turned the paper over and he started writing about values. And suddenly, he was able to make progress. And this is an interesting thing for you. On one hand, when you're looking at things, what you're good at, what you enjoy doing are really important, but also what can make a huge difference is your values. And if you can get alignment between your values and what you do within work, it is generally thought that you can have a lot of success. This is a real tenet in the whole psychology, in the positive psychology movement. Martin Seligman has written a huge amount of this. This is really the core of his book, Authentic Happiness. He says that people are at their happiest when they can move into work which really aligns with their core values and their core aspirations. So Ryan Clement talks about that, and it's useful. And the other thing we're asking you to do is to do the workbook, the options workbook, which we'll be sending out to everybody after the meeting. The last thing, of course, we're asking people to do is to bring something along to the next meeting that it might be or mightn't be of interest to you, but you're bringing it along because you believe it would be of benefit to somebody else at the meeting, or maybe a number of people at the meeting, and it's something you reckon that they mightn't have come across. So that's the end of Module 2, and look forward to talking to you again in Module 3. Bye.